Well, Tov.
Boa Tov, a gute Woche, gute Woche, a freiliche Woche. The Gemara says a story about Rab Nachman and Rab Yitzchak. They're eating together, and Rab Nachman asked Rab Yitzchak to say a teaching of Torah. So Rab Yitzchak tells Rab Nachman, Ein Masichem Besuda, you're not allowed to talk during a meal. Why? Shema Yaktim Kon Leveshet, because maybe the food pipe and the wind pipe will get mixed up and be dangerous. So at the end of the meal, Nachman asked Rabbi Yitzchak to tell him again. Tell me a teaching. He says, "So said Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan said, Yaakov Avinu lo yimes. Yaakov our father did not die." And so Rabbi Nachman asked Rabbi Yitzchak, "He didn't die. Why does the Torah say that he was embalmed and he was buried? Was this for naught? Was it for naught that he was eulogized? Was it for naught that he was embalmed?" So Rabbi Yitzchak responded, Mikra ani deirish, I am interpreting a verse in the Torah. The Torah says, Kini ba, I'm going to come, Hashem says, I'm going to save you from a distance. I'm going to come to you, Yaakov, and to your children, and to save you. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, I'm interpreting this verse that Yaakov and his children are put in the same sentence. And just like Yaakov's children are alive, so too is Yaakov alive. Ma'azare b'chayim afu b'chayim. That's the story the Gemara says. This story brings us many, many questions. Question number one, what's the meaning of the question that Rav Nachman asked Rabbi Yitzchak? If Yaakov was alive, the question is not why did they embalm him or why did they eulogize him? The question is how they take a live person and put him in the ground. If Rabbi Yitzchak didn't want to interrupt the meal, and he wanted to just say a short teaching of Torah instead of saying you cannot say words of Torah in the meal, he should have just said Yaakov, our father didn't die. It's 4 words, and 3 words, Yaakov lemes. Instead of saying the 4-word teaching, so if his intent is not to get into conversation, because you're not supposed to talk during a meal, he could have said the second teaching first. And third of all, what's the connection between these 2 teachings? Why does a Gemara begin the story with we can't talk during a meal, and then continue on with his other teaching about how a tzaddik Yaakov doesn't die? What's going on over here? So the answer is like this. The Torah tells us that we're supposed to say words of Torah, to study words of Torah. The Torah tells us that the words of Torah protect us. So here there is a clash between the Torah and nature. The Torah says you're supposed to say words of Torah. On the other hand, it's dangerous to say words of Torah because you're eating. So what should you do? So the halacha is you're not allowed to talk during a meal. The question though is why can't you talk during a meal? Is the reason you can't talk during a meal is that because the world is an entity, and the Torah reckons with the existence of the world? The Torah is limited by the existence of the world, and the Torah is defined by the parameters and nature of the world? Or is it the opposite? Is it that the Torah is infinite? The Torah has no limitations, and the Torah wants us to bring its light into the confines of the world, and therefore the Torah tells us that we should function according to the parameters of the world. Which one is it? So when the Gemara says that Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Yitzchak were eating together, Rabbi Yitzchak knew that Rabbi Nachman knows that you're not supposed to talk during a meal. The question though is why? Why can't you talk during a meal? Does the world have a separate importance unto its own? Or is its only existence only the definition of what Torah says it is? So therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak continued after the meal and told him the teaching about Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov, our father, didn't die. Yaakov's whole essence is Torah. Yaakov's whole entire being is Torah. Yaakov does not die. Yaakov cannot die because Torah is something which is eternal. Torah is something which is forever. As Rashi explains the words of the Gemara, Svurim hayu shemes. They thought that Yaakov died, but Yaakov did not die. Yaakov cannot die because Yaakov, like the Torah, is forever and eternal. So the question that Rabbi Yitzchak got then from Nachman was, yes, I know Rabbi Yitzchak that Yaakov doesn't die. I know that, but doesn't the Torah itself say that you're supposed that Yaakov was embalmed and Yaakov was eulogized? Doesn't the Torah itself say that this was meant to be done according to Torah? Yes, the Egyptians thought that he died. I understand that. But doesn't the Torah say that he should be embalmed? Doesn't the Torah say that he should be eulogized? So Rabbi Yitzchak says the Torah deals with the Torah addresses us on two planes. There is the simple way the Torah addresses the way things look to our eyes, and there is the truth of the Torah, which is beyond the way things look to our eyes. There is the Torah addressing the scenario which the Egyptians are experiencing. The Egyptians see that Yaakov dies, and the Egyptians are told, therefore, the Torah says, therefore, that Yaakov should be buried, Yaakov should be embalmed, Yaakov should be eulogized. But Mikra ani Deiresh, if you want to be Deiresh means to interpret, Deiresh also means to look deeper. If you want to go deeper, then you'll discover that it's impossible that Yaakov dies. It's impossible that the truth of Torah is compromised in any way. On the contrary, Yaakov did not die, and his children do not die, because Yaakov is alive, as the Talmud says, that just like his children are alive, in the very same way his children are alive, that is how Yaakov is alive. The reason we know Yaakov is alive is because his children are alive. We see that Yaakov's light and life and purpose continues on and on and on. But that's how we see it. But what makes his children alive, what causes his children to be alive, is Yaakov. Yaakov is what animates his children. Yaakov's children are alive because he is alive. We know he's alive because of his children. But what animates his children is his presence. Because the tzaddik, the Yaakov Avinu, whose whole being is Torah, is someone that is beyond the parameters of time and space, beyond limitations of time and space, and therefore the whole concept of a cessation and of an ending doesn't apply to Yaakov. Yaakov doesn't die. That's the truth of Torah. The Egyptians, they don't have that perspective. They see differently. I'm sharing this teaching in the context of this upcoming week is Gimel Tammuz, the 3rd of Tammuz. We had this past Shabbos an extraordinary speaker, Rabbi Marcus Solomon, who shared with us a teaching, a story actually, which I think is consonant with the time that we're in now, approaching the 3rd of Tammuz, and approaching the understanding of what a tzaddik is in our time, what the Rebbe is who the Rebbe is in our time. The word Nasi means the leader of the Jewish people, but Nasi also means to lift up the Jewish people, to lift the Jewish people up. That's what the word Nasi means, to raise up the Jewish people. So the presence of the Rebbe in our lives is such that the Rebbe lifts us up all up. And the reason why the word Nasi is Nun, Sin, Yud, Aleph, is because every Nasi, every leader of the Jewish people, is a nitzutz to Yaakov and is a spark of Yaakov Avinu. And just like it says about Yaakov didn't die, so too it says about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe didn't die, and so too the leader of the Jewish people in every generation, as the Gemara says, just like before their apparent passing, they served and they took care of the Jewish people, so too there's no such thing as a tzaddik really leaving his flock. Lo yaziv esei marisei, he doesn't leave his flock. So this is a story he shared. Similar to, he's from Australia, he's a justice on the Supreme Court in Australia. And he said that the Aborigines were there far before the British, and yet the British, they decided to colonize Australia, and they consider Australia to be part of their country. Why? The British said that Australia has no real owner. The territory, he used a legal term for it, I don't know, I forgot it's Terralinas or something like that, there's no real owner of the country. And since there's no real owner of the country, therefore they're able to take possession of it because there is no real owner of the country. That's the original assumption of power the British had. That these primitive Aborigines, they don't have this ability to take control of the land. So therefore the British took control of the land, and they are the owners of the land. So Rabbi Solomon said that in his earlier days as a barrister, that's what they call him in Australia, as a lawyer. So his firm took on this case of these Aborigines who wanted to exercise their rights as to the ownership of the land of Australia. The Australia made a rule, made a law that if someone could prove that they were in the same possession of their land that they're in now from the 1860s, I forgot the exact time, then they will be given the rights to they maintain the rights to their property. So he went to this far off city in Australia called Rova. And in this city, he's supposed to meet with the leaders, the elders of this tribe in Australia. And he's supposed to have a converse with them about the plan of this lawsuit and to make a communication and figure out what the best plan forward is. He said it was very, very hot. He doesn't know the exact number in Fahrenheit, but it was over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. He's in this room. And as he begins talking to them, 3 minutes in, a fight breaks out. But not like the kind of fight that people often have sometimes, unfortunately, in a synagogue. I wasn't called up to the Torah. This was a real fight. Someone took out a boomerang and was hitting the guy in the head. Serious stuff. So he realized very quickly he's supposed to get control over here and talk to them. He jumps on the table and he says, I also am from a tribe. I am from the tribe of the Israelites, the tribe of the Jewish people. He said that because of Christian missionaries, a lot of these Aborigines knew a little bit of the Bible. In fact, the leader of this Aboriginal group, he had a biblical name. So he said, I am from the tribe of the Israelites. And let me tell you something. The Israelites, whenever they got into a quarrel, they lost their land. They always lost their land whenever they disagreed with each other. So if you want to hold on to your land, the first thing you need to do is to get along. So those words transformed the Aborigines, and they looked at him with a new level of respect, and they considered him their leader from that moment on. So he had to, working for this firm or for this case, he had many, many meetings with the various leaders of these Aborigines. And at one point, he was talking with this lady named Michelle, who was a part of one of the leaders of the Aboriginal tribe. Michelle says, she asked Michelle this question. He says, I want to ask you a question. The Jews, they have lost their homeland, and they've been exiled from country to country and city to city all over the world for thousands of years. And the Jewish people, about the Holocaust. And yet right after the Holocaust, the Jewish people in Israel and in cities throughout the world rebuild, and they rebuild more than before. Why don't the Aborigines do the same? Why aren't the Aborigines like the Jews? That's what he asked this lady. This lady responded, fascinating. She said, you don't understand. For an Aborigine, the soul of Aborigines is in the land, is in the soil, is in the trees, is in the water, in our territory. That's where our soul is. If you remove us from our land, we don't have a soul. Can you imagine, she says, to live without a soul? Can you imagine for a people to be without a soul? And you wonder why we don't take charge. We're living without a soul. On the other hand, this Aborigine said, on the other hand, you Jews, wherever you are, you have your leaders, you have your Torah, you have your God. You're never really without a soul. You have a soul wherever you are. And the truth is, what she said, we learned in last week's Torah portion, whenever the Jewish people traveled, they traveled by Moses, instructing them to, and Moshe instructing them to follow the clouds. That's how they left Egypt. That's how they arrived in Israel, following the clouds of God, following Moshe Rabbeinu. And so this is the soul of the Jewish people. Soul of the Jewish people is that in every generation there is a Moshe Rabbeinu, there is a Moses, and he is the one who guides us from Egypt till we get to Eretz Yisrael, till we get to the Promised Land, till we get the coming of Mashiach. That's how we're here. It's through the instruction of the same way our grandparents left Egypt and came to Israel, so too we have the same soul and the same leader, as the Zohar says, is Pashtrusa de Moshe Chol Dara V'Dara. There's an extension of Moshe in every generation. And just like in this Talmudic discussion here of Nachman and Rabbi Yitzchak, we learned about how the Torah addresses two different planes. The Torah addresses the way things seem on the surface, and there is the way the Torah expresses the truth, how it is beyond the way things are on the surface. So too, the leader of the Jewish people, also his words are also the ability to guide us in a very practical way, and yet to be the truth of Hashem that is infinite, that is beyond limitations of time and space. Rabbi Solomon shared a personal story. He said that growing up in his background in Australia, he's now living in Perth in Australia. He was very skeptical, and even though he went to Chabad yeshivas, he never really drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. He never became a chassid in the simple sense of the word, and therefore he never asked a question to the questions in his life to the Rebbe that were important life questions. He asked the Rebbe who we should get married to. Yes, the critical yes, a critical question like that, but questions that came up in his life, he didn't actually address the Rebbe with. And a major question came up in his life. His wife's father was a lawyer, and because of this, he also was encouraged to get into this into law, and he also enjoyed teaching at the same time. And he wasn't sure how to calibrate both of these aspirations. And he wrote to the Rebbe. He wasn't going to write to the Rebbe, but he was friends with another chassid, prominent chassid in Australia, Rabbi Yossel Gudnik, and who told him, "Listen, you got to realize something. You're not meant to just white knuckle your life by yourself. The reason why Hashem gave you a Rebbe is for this purpose. You have a question in your life, you need to ask the Rebbe. You need to be smart and ask the Rebbe. Why would you go on your own when you're able to ask Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu himself in our time? Why would you do that?" So Rabbi Salman didn't feel he wasn't so convinced. Rabbi Gunik says, "Listen, you write to the Rebbe your life, write to the Rebbe who you are. If you feel doesn't know who you are, then write in detail." So he wrote a page, and he asked the Rebbe these 6 options. What should he do? And the Rebbe responded, "You should continue your profession as a lawyer, but that's not a contradiction to also pursuing education as well. You should also continue to educate as well." And this is something that the Rebbe told others as well, that when people looked at their life in a binary way, there's only one option, not 2 options. But the Rebbe, reveals the truth in the world, and as the word nasim is lift up, he revealed in him something he didn't know about himself. And so he continued his law profession and incredibly successful, not just as a judge, but as a justice in the Supreme Court of Western Australia. And interestingly, he said it took 30 years for him to fully appreciate the depth of what the Rebbe said. He said that the Australian papers always write about the new justices, and when he became a justice, they did a write up on him too, and they classified him as this lawyer and educator was chosen to become a justice for Western Australia. These words, he said, of the newspaper really brought home what the Rebbe instructed him 30 years before. And he said when the Rebbe gave this instruction, he followed it. He created this program called Beit Midrash in his community in Perth for young and for old, which is still going on to this day, 33 years later, following this instruction from the Rebbe. And this was what brought him this success in his field, because of his identity as not just as a lawyer but also as an educator. That's what brought him to this distinction of the being in the headlines, lawyer and educator. The bottom line is that our connection to the Rebbe, as it says in our Yom Yom, the 26th of Shvat, love, affection, is a spirit of life in the service of Hashem according to Chassidus. It is the bond that connects a chassid with a Rebbe, and the connection of a Rebbe to a chassid. And it is the bond that connects chassidim to each other. It knows no boundaries and is beyond the confines of time and space. So as we approach the third of Tammuz, it behooves us to reach a different level in our connection to the Rebbe. I'll share with you one more story on this note. The Mittel Rebbe was entrusted by his father before he became Rebbe, when he was much younger, to be the educator of the Hasidim and the younger Hasidim. The Mittel Rebbe took on this task, and on one occasion, the Mittel Rebbe was speaking with great passion to the Hasidim, to such an extent that he became physically ill. When he became physically ill, one of the elder Chassidim came to the Mittel Rebbe and he said to him, I just want to ask you, why it hurt his heart? Why'd you do that? Why'd you speak in such a way? And the surface his question was, why would you compromise your health? But perhaps the question is deeper. Why be so emotional? Why not approach things in a more intellectual way? What brought this about? Why not approach things with the intellect? Why the emotions? Chabad, after all, means the intellect. So the Mittel Rebbe said, my father told me that you have to look at every Jew as they originate from Machshava Hakduma Da'ak. The oversimplified version of what that means is that when God created the world, when God desired to create the world, it arose in God's thought all that will ever exist. In a second, God pictured all that every creature that will ever exist in the history of every creature that will ever exist forever in one thought. That thought is called Ak. So you have to look at a Jew and realize a Jew is rooted in God's plan of creation. A Jew is rooted in godliness. A Jew is rooted in the truth. So the Mittel Rebbe said he learned three things from this, but for now, let's just focus on how this was a response to this chassid. Mittel Rebbe said, I realized that I too was rooted in Machshava Duma Da'ak. My father told me I have to look at myself also, that I come from Machshava Duma Da'ak. I come from that place as well. And therefore I thought about how Hashem has chosen my soul for the mission that I am in. And I therefore gave myself over to this mission with a full heart, knowing that I'm talking to people, and I'm not just talking to them, I'm talking to their children, their grandchildren for generations. That Hashem has put me in their life, and I put me in their life that I'm supposed to give them something, and I have to give them with all that I have. So as we're approaching the Rebbe's day of Gimel Tammuz, it's possible to be to take things in a more external way, in a more peripheral way, but Gimel Tammuz behooves us to look deeper. Okay, one more story. There was it's customary Matzah Shabbos when we make Havdalah to smell besamim, to smelling salts, not smelling salts, to smell spices, to revive the soul. When the Shabbos ends, to revive the soul, we're supposed to smell the besamim. People use cloves often. So the Rebbe would make Havdalah publicly at the end of a holiday, before distributing wine from his cup. The Rebbe would lead the grace after meals. Then it would daven Ma'ariv, and then the Rebbe would distribute wine from his cup for a blessing for everyone after they've made Havdalah. Now, in a year like this year, where Shavuos fell out on Friday and Shabbos, Not only does Havdalah contain the wine, but Havdalah also contains what we do on Shabbos, which is the candle and the psamim. And this boy noticed how the Rebbe's psamim was just a carton of cloves, and he's like, "This isn't good. We have to honor the Rebbe. We should give the Rebbe a more prestigious psamim." And see, he didn't have too much money, but whatever he had, he went into a store in Crown Heights, and he bought the Rebbe a psamim, a more of a silver psamim thing. And this something that he bought had like ridges at the end, through which you smell through those ridges, through the crevices in this little container. You were able to smell the cloves within. He brought that into the Rebbe's secretariat, and the secretariat decided to put it on the table, and the Rebbe made Havdalah. The Rebbe picked it up, and the Rebbe wanted to open it, and it was hard to, you couldn't open it really. And so the Rebbe asked that they basically they poured it into a napkin, and the Rebbe the Rebbe smelled the psamim from the napkin, not from the container. So I saw in the Kvar Chabad Rabbi interesting analysis of this according to halacha. Why wouldn't the Rebbe want to smell from the crevices in the side? Why would they want to put it into another container? And make a long story short, he said that according to the Taz mentions that you cannot smell from a container. You have to smell actual cloves. In other words, if cloves were in a container once, or like often they sell coffee, they put in an aroma of coffee into the container more than the coffee itself, so people want to drink the coffee. So if you have a container which has an aroma, you can't use it for some. You have to actually smell from the cloves. So there's an external aroma and there's an inner aroma. There's an aroma which is brought by the cloves once there. Then there's an inner aroma. What's really going on? So the mitzvah, the custom of the psamim is to actually have the real aroma of the cloves, not just what's left over, not just the external thing. So when you're taking from even though there were actual cloves in this container, but since there's also fragrance coming from the container as well, so perhaps that was an issue on the Rebbe's level of Yiddishkeit, not necessarily questionable for regular people. On the Rebbe's level, that was considered. That's perhaps the reason. But the point is that there's taking things in an external way and taking things in a deeper, higher way. And as we're approaching Yom Tammuz, we need to be ufeb, to lift ourselves up. The Rebbe is the Nasi, the one who lifts us all up, and we have to connect the Rebbe and lift up to a higher level. And in that manner, we will be lifted up by the Rebbe and taken to Eretz Yisrael, becoming Mashiach